Hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about the recent announcements made by Atlus regarding the future of Persona 5. These announcements took place during a 2-day concert that was being live streamed in Japan, so there hasn't exactly been a lot of official translated information about what happened. But obviously some trailers were shown, so I'm basing my opinion off of those. Really, this is a day that I've been sort of dreading ever since I first started playing Persona 5. Just in case you haven't seen my video on the game, I think that Persona 5 was a really great RPG, possibly one of the best RPGs of the last decade. That's not something I would say lightly. There's a lot of RPGs that I've been very disappointed with, or otherwise ignored over the years, and this game is one of those that felt like a fresh breath of air to me. But given what I've seen Atlus do in the past, I knew that they wouldn't be able to just leave the game alone and let it become the classic that it deserves to be. I brought this up in my other videos about Persona, but if you don't know, Atlus loves to re-release their games, and this has been the case for almost every entry in the Persona series. Now, I'm just gonna say it, I'm not a fan of video games getting re-released. It's never something that I've been into. Often it punishes people for buying the game when it first comes out, and then they'll still feel like they're missing out if they're not playing the most recent version of it, so they get that pressure that they have to buy it once again. I can understand re-releasing a game after a long time, when there's new hardware, trying to add a little extra stuff to make the experience fresh, but that's not exactly what I feel Atlus has been doing with all these re-releases. You can apply that logic to things like Persona 4 Golden or Catherine Full Body, because these are being released after a decent amount of time has passed, and nobody's really playing the game on the original hardware anymore. Persona 3 wasn't so lucky. They came out with a newer version of the game less than a year after it originally came out, and then a PSP version with some extra changes or additions, and I appreciate how they went about implementing some of that new stuff, but they did end up in a situation where there's now no longer a definitive version of the game. Because of this, it's hard for me to recommend that people actually go play Persona 3 if I don't know what consoles they already have. But with Persona 5's Royal re-release coming out this year for Japan, Atlus has found themselves in a spot that honestly I think is kind of ugly. This version of the game is not being released on any new hardware at all, so there's no reason for Royal to be sold as an entire game. It could very easily be implemented as a pack of downloadable content. And honestly, I kind of think that Royal might be more profitable if it was packaged that way. Because not only would you probably get an immediate sale from people who already own Persona 5, but new fans would be more eager to jump in because Persona 5's price was recently reduced to $20. And assuming that the DLC costs less than $40, which it probably should, it would be very easy to convince new players to get the game and then buy that content straight up. I just think that the way they're doing it now, having you buy a whole nother disc or a digital application of the game, is not a great way of doing business. It's just punishing people who were buying the game when it first came out, and it just feels so outdated. That's the kind of thing that was happening for like the first Resident Evil, and it happened a lot during the PS2 days. We're way past this. And that's easily my biggest complaint with this whole re-release, but I do have another one that's a little different. That would be that I don't think we need Persona 5R at all. I've already spoken about how much I love Persona 5, and it's exactly because of that I don't think we need any new story content added to the game. The version of the game that I think is fantastic is the version that we already have. The fact that you can buy it for $20 right now means that that's the version of the game that I'm going to keep recommending to people. I don't think that people should wait until 2020 for the Western release of the Royal version. It's a waste of time. I've spoken to people who look at these things like the director's cut of a movie, and I can't say that I see it that way. Director's cuts usually exist because edits had to be made to please the studio because of either getting an appropriate rating or getting the right length. And there's no evidence that any of this content that's going to be in this version of the game is stuff that was left on the cutting room floor or anything like that. And then you have other director's cuts where they're produced because the original version of the movie had enough of a following that they could afford to re-edit the film. And that is usually because the original release of the film is more often than not the version of the work that becomes culturally significant. If Persona 5 wasn't already as successful as it was, there wouldn't be any Royal version. The team would have just moved on to a new project. They would have just left this behind. I will give you an idea of what I think Atlus actually should have done instead of this. Really, there are already examples of this, because they should have done what they did with something like Persona 2 or Shin Megami Tensei 4. Make a new game that's built on the foundation of the previous one. This could be like a sequel, it'll probably play largely the same, and it would probably feature some of the same overworld locations, definitely have a lot of the same enemies and same themes. But you could also do something a little different, like you could do an alternate story. It might be interesting if you did a game that follows the bad ending of Persona 5. That might be a neat idea. But really, this would be far from the first time that companies have done something like this. And I still think that Atlus could have pulled this off. I think that they could have made a genuine sequel to Persona 5 and released it in the same time frame that it's taken them to make this port. Maybe they feel that they wouldn't make as much money if they did that, but that brings me to another point. The easiest way that they could make more money off Persona 5 is just to port it to more platforms. And I have to say, I was pretty shocked that we didn't get any announcements like that. I wasn't expecting them to drop like a PC port or anything, but an Xbox or Switch release would definitely garner a lot of very quick sales for Atlus. And when you expand your audience like that, that's only going to improve the sales of everything you put out afterwards. And it's not like they're not opposed to expanding outside of the PlayStation, because they actually announced a new spin-off game that is going to be on the Switch. And at the same time, they're trying to promote Persona 5 Royal, which they're awkwardly not really addressing if it's going to be on anything other than PS4 right now. I know there's a lot of people holding out hope that Nintendo is going to announce the Switch port themselves during a direct or something, but I don't see any reason why that would be the case. This concert was something that Atlus spent a fair amount of time promoting, and honestly, even going in with really low expectations, this was kind of an underwhelming set of announcements, in my opinion. Since Atlus is under Sega's umbrella, I think that upper management needs to do a better job of promoting the series as a whole. I really appreciate what Sega's been doing with Yakuza by trying to port pretty much every entry to PlayStation 4 and then eventually the PC. And if what I've read is true, that's been a pretty good financial return for them. You could also bring up some of the other recent PC ports they've done for things like Bayonetta, Vanquish, and most recently the original version of Catherine, which is confusing because Atlus is already doing an updated version that's supposed to come out in the West this September for PS4 only. But I suppose that's just how Atlus operates, and it's very frustrating because they're a company that they've produced a lot of games that I really like, and I just kind of wish they had a change of heart or something, because I feel like they're only catering towards the most single-minded and deep-pocketed fans that they have. Persona 5 got a ton of exposure after its release. It got critical acclaim, Game of the Year nominations, and maybe even a few wins. Not to mention that Joker just got put in Smash Brothers, for Christ's sakes. I'd think that Atlus would want to build off of that momentum as effectively as they can, but I get the sense that whoever's in charge there, they still think that they're making games for a niche Japanese market. But like it or not, Atlus is starting to become a global brand. They have fans all over the world, and those fans would love to spend money on fair deals. But that's all I have to say about this topic. Please let me know what you think about Persona 5, the re-releases, spin-offs, and maybe you don't agree with me on this. That's fine. You're totally entitled to be excited for more Persona 5. It's one of those games I'd like to talk about more on this channel, but I can't really promise when that would be. Otherwise, just stay tuned for more, and we'll see you around out there.